everybody, welcome back. It's Steve Fretzin, and I am the host of the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. We are here for your listening pleasure and viewing pleasure. If you go to YouTube, we put all these up on YouTube. You can check them out there. And most recently, we are transcribing these into two-page blogcasts. So if you want to check out our blogcasts, go to my website, fretzin.com/blog, and you can check out our blogcasts, which are awesome. We are ready to rock and roll here to help you to be that lawyer, confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. I've got a really amazing and unique guest today. I'm a huge fan of podcasting. Gordon, I've written 4 books. I've written for publications. I've done all that stuff, and nothing compares to podcasting. So I'm super excited to have you. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, thanks for having me, Steve. Boy,
Yeah.
you said amazing or something. You set the bar kind of high, so I'll try.
Just so you know, everybody, it's all downhill from here. No, we are going to have some fun today. We're going to start off with our quote of the show, and then I want to get into your background a little bit. What got you here won't get you there. And that's James Wedmore, an online business coach. Talk to us about that quote of the show. I love it.
Well, James is very much about mindset-oriented changes to your life and your processes to move to the next level in things. So really what he's saying is, look, you've achieved whatever success in your life you've achieved by doing what you've been doing. But if you want to go to the next level, you're going to have to change something, and it starts internally with you. So that's really the point of that message. And I think that's really a true statement.
Yeah. And I would just add, maybe this is a different spinoff, but what made you successful as a lawyer or made you successful as a professional in the last 10 years may not be what's going to make you successful in the next 10 years, right? We have to continue to look ahead and what's changing in the world and what's changing in our environment and our industry and things like that. So, I thought books, right? Just write some books and that's going to make me, is this, and look, there's no question that books are awesome and that, if you're looking to be an authority, books are the way to go. But I didn't have the glimmer of podcasting in my eye 10 years ago like I should have. And I know you've been in this before it became a thing. But to that point, give us your background because it's extraordinary.
Well, so I've been practicing entertainment law since the early 90s when I came out of law school. That was right after the LA law surge in law school enrollment. So it was hard to find jobs and things anyway. So I've been doing entertainment law, and that's all kinds of media, but I sort of focused on film and theater as my 2 main focuses. And then as a strategy for marketing my practice, I was doing, this is before the email and I had a print newsletter, and then I shifted that into an online email newsletter and a blog. And at some point, I discovered this thing called podcasting. I've always been an early adopter, a tech geek, and whatever. I was a guy that I was following in the tech world who started his own podcast after he left a TV network he was on. Leo Laporte is his name. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. When I became a listener, and then pretty soon someone asked me to be a guest on their podcast, and I got to geek out with that. This is the mid 2000s, so 2005 or 6, something like that. And got the bug. So I started my own show back in 2009.
Well, it doesn't hurt that you've got this sexy broadcaster's voice, right, Gordon? I mean, you're
well, it's early here. I just woke up, Steve.
You still got the film in your throat, right? Hey, everybody, just so you know, Gordon Firemark is the owner of Firemark Entertainment Law, and we're going to talk about podcasting. In podcasting is 100% not for everybody. There are certain people that probably shouldn't be podcasting, and I'm not sure who they are, and I'm not going to say. But who should be podcasting? What kinds of lawyers should be podcasting, and how do they even get started with something like that? Because it seems sort of intense to start a podcast.
Well, I'd say starting a podcast is intense, but doing guesting on people's podcasts is a good way to get started, get your feet wet, learn a little bit about how to hook up a microphone to the computer and do and honestly, since the pandemic, when we've all gotten used to doing Zoom and being set up for these kinds of things, it's gotten a lot more commonplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, starting a podcast is, there's a small investment in equipment and technology and a bit of an investment in time, and there's a learning curve. But once you do it, I think it's a fantastic way of getting the word out and, publishing your message on a regular basis. If you're consistent about it, you're making an awful lot of content. And sitting down and writing a blog post, there's a mental thing where you just have to get into that headspace of doing it. But somehow talking into a microphone, at least for me and a lot of people like me, it's just easy. Sit
Yeah.
down, talk into a microphone, say what's on your mind, and you don't have to be quite as formal in the writing style and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I
Yeah.
think audiences actually really appreciate that.
Yeah. I was talking to a podcasting friend of mine. She's in the legal, like, health and wellness space. And she was telling me about all the editing she's doing and taking out every and ah and everything. I was like, what? Like, that's not, you don't need to do that. Like, I hit record with you and then I hit stop. And like everything that happens in the middle, that's the show. Like, there's no editing at all other than if my dog goes nuts or there's a tremendous siren outside or something. But it's like you don't have it. I think part of it is it's okay to be authentic and be informal, to your point, and not feel like you have to make it perfect. You don't need perfection.
Yeah, I mean, really, I do the same thing. Like both of my shows are what I call live to drive. So we
Yeah.
we press record, we start doing the show. I even roll the music and everything in automatically, so that when I'm done, it's really a finished episode. And yeah, I think that authenticity, as you described, is really
Yeah.
the right thing. I'll tell you, it does mean more prep on the front end, but and your show, Steve, is a great example of this. For your listeners who should have been a little bit on the background stuff. You reminded me about 6 times about the call, so you made sure I was going to show up, and I'm sure you did some research and reading and looking into me a little bit, either before we booked the call or as you were prepping to ask me these questions today. And you also engaged in a little onboarding with me. So you do the work up front, so you don't have to do all that post
Yeah.
production and extract the story and things from.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're right about editing out the ums and ahs. It's If it's too much of it, it's one thing, but it's the way we talk naturally. So
The
we
thing
should be
that
that.
I had to fix about myself, and I'm sure that people that have listened to me for, a year or more can pick up on, the subtleties of things that I may say too often or that whatever.
Mhm.
But like there's somebody that like they say, to be honest, and they keep saying that over and over, or they
Yeah.
just say you're repeating the same word over and over again and not realizing that you're doing it. That can sometimes, be, but I think it's important to like listen back to your shows, pick up on the patterns and make those adjustments. Are you smiling for a reason?
My kids listen sometimes to my show and they'll say, Dad, 36 ums.
Yeah, right. Thanks for nothing. No,
If nothing makes you
it's
more
like I'm back in
self-conscious.
speech class all over again, right?
Right.
I had the teacher with that. She'd sit there and she'd mark off and in every 10 ums you got a lower grade or something. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous. Shout out to Mrs. Perry from
Right
Highland High
on.
School. Ooh. Anyway, hey, something else I want. Now I'm going to think about every time I say The thing I want to also mention is when I got into podcasting, I assumed it was a tremendous amount of work on my end, and I was introduced to a podcast editing production company called Turnkey Podcast out of LA, and shout
Mhm.
out to the boys there. And it really is plug and play to some degree because I upload it into a software when I'm
Mhm.
done, and they literally handle it. So I just want people to know that you can do it yourself and
Yeah.
DIY it all you want. You can hire a VA, a lot of options, but it doesn't have to be a major ordeal like we may think it is.
Yeah, I think you need a little more than a trained monkey, but yeah, you could train your kid to do it. You could train an assistant in the office to handle the uploading and the keywords
Yeah,
and the promoting. And actually, I would say the hardest part of a podcast is promoting it, getting it out there to audiences so it gets listened to.
yeah.
But I'm bullish on this medium, and for lawyers, I think it's a great way to showcase your expertise, position yourself as an authority, and get into a groove of making content regularly enough that it makes a difference for SEO and discoverability and all those kinds of things.
So is it better for some types of attorneys than others? And maybe we're talking about someone that's a local attorney in a small town versus someone who's national or international or business to business versus business to consumer. Like talk through like who it might be best for or maybe not so great for.
Well, I mean, I think it can be great for anyone.
Okay.
I'll say if you do motorcycle accident injury cases, chances are people aren't looking for a podcast about a motorcycle accident injury until they've been in one. So you're sort of, at the mercy, if that's the subject matter you do, but you can find a subject that motorcycle riders who are likely to get into accidents might be interested. So maybe do a podcast about touring or about the gear, the bikes, and those kinds of things. Or maybe you just sponsor a show about something else that people, wine or beer or something. So, um, I mean, I think that if you have a business to business kind of a practice where there's, a market for a thirst for knowledge about the field, even when there's nobody with an actual litigation ready to start or something like that, it can be great, for those of us that do transactional work and educating the audience. In my case, educating. One of my podcasts is about other lawyers. I educate other lawyers about entertainment law. It's called Entertainment Law Update, and that it's a very niche market, but that positions me with them, and then referrals come. On the other side, you can do a client-facing show that really just informs, educates, and enlightens the public and tells them about who you are. And when they do go searching for stuff, they find you. And that can be really beneficial.
Yeah. There's so many benefits that I have seen as a podcaster, and I've probably gotten a dozen people into podcasting over the last number of years because I'm so passionate about it, like you are. There's the marketing branding side of how it helps you expand your brand and your right, and just people start to get to know you and see you as an expert. And there's a couple others I want to get into, but let's start with that one and talk about the branding, marketing, and the value of podcasting as it relates to those two areas.
Well, I'll say, one of the key elements of marketing and advertising is you have to make a lot of impressions in order to reel in a client or turn a prospect into a lead, as they say. Podcasting by its nature is episodic. So you're doing it hopefully every week or whatever, so that you're making a lot of those impressions. And people will start to associate you with your topic or your title or whatever it is. And it becomes a great way to position yourself in the mind of your audience. Another thing that's great about podcasting, I'm going to take us in another direction, Steve, is if you're doing a show in a particular business niche and you just interview the experts and the leaders in the niche, I won't say it's a pretext, but it's a basis for getting in front of those people that you might not otherwise have. Hey, you can call them up and say, hey, I want to take you to lunch, and they'll most of the time say, I'm too busy, book something 3 years from now. But I want to have you on my podcast. Now they get they're interested. People, everybody's their own favorite subject. Right?
Yeah, right. And you're not just talking about their favorite subject, but you're putting them on a platform that gives them exposure. It gives them content. It's a value add. And they're more open to taking that meeting, to your point, than a lunch where they feel like they're going to get sold.
And it's usually a memorable contact, one way or the other. Make sure it's a positive memory. But I think that's great. And then you also get the benefit of the sort of expertise by osmosis. You're rubbing up against people. Some of their expertise wears off on you. And so it helps with the positioning and things.
Yeah, I mean, look, I spend every day, all day working with lawyers on business development and marketing, et cetera. However, I also feel like I'm like a part-time lawyer in some way, because I'm hearing about their cases. I'm hearing about, the depositions. I mean, all the stuff that they share with me and internally, and all confidential, by the way. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's interesting to me. And so when I watch detective shows and cop shows and lawyer shows, my wife is just sitting there watching me because she thinks I'm going to guess the answer or how it's going to come out or whatever. But I think, to your point, there's a marketing and a branding element and a content creation element. There's a direct business element. The other piece that I love is the development of my network from a standpoint of meeting you and meeting all these experts in legal. They're never going to be clients of mine. That's okay. But they're legal tech people, they're legal marketing people, they're podcasting people, they're book. So if somebody needs something, I'm like, they should go to me first. I'm the resource now, because I've got 450 episodes of meeting all these amazing people that I never would have met otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you another thing, that Entertainment Law Update, because we're doing a legal story, legal case briefs, essentially, I think it makes me a better lawyer. I'm staying on top of my field in a way that most other lawyers are relying on me to do for them. So I'm forced into studying and reading those opinions and doing some analysis and thinking about them and talking it over with people. So
Yeah. And I facilitate a lot of meetings. I have my Rainmaker roundtables made up of
mhm.
managing partners from around the country.
Yeah.
And I run a provisors group here in Chicago, which is like a 10,000 person national thing.
Mm,
And I'm not like a professional like DJ or anything, but I feel like I'm able to facilitate so much better and ask really good questions and
mhm.
keep things moving because 450 opportunities for me to interview and evaluate and have conversations that are being recorded and they're going to be put out there. They can't suck.
Yeah.
And so that's been a huge side perk and benefit that I didn't even think about, 5 years ago.
Yeah. Right. You get to be a curator, not just of information, but of people
Yeah.
and connections, which is great.
Any thoughts on the monetization of a podcast and how people monetize or just use it as a profit center?
Yeah. I read an interesting quote by a fellow friend of mine named Tom Webster, who was a statistics guy, a researcher. And his point was, you don't monetize a podcast, you monetize an audience.
Mm,
I
I
think
like
that's
that.
important to remember. So you have to have the audience, and if you build it, they will come. Doesn't work. You have to have an audience, and so that's the strategy play is figure out how you're going to get people to pay attention to what you're doing and listen. That said, I don't think every podcast has to be monetized directly. I think that from myself, I'm an example. I'm not looking to sell ads on my show. I do. I mean, every once in a while, you'll hear or see an ad on one of my shows, but that's not how I'm expecting to make my money. I'm monetizing by positioning myself in a way that people are going to either refer business to me or call me directly as a client. And so again, it's just my marketing channel of choice, I
Yeah.
guess you could say. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the so there's a little bit of the legal side I want to talk through with you.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, I'm pretty prepared for my guests, and part of that is having them fill out a form
Hmm.
so that I have all their the Twitter handle and all the details and their
Yeah.
background and their bio and all that jazz. But at the end of it, I have this statement that says, by signing below, I agree to granting permission to Steve Fretzin to be that lawyer to record, interview, post content on the internet, obtain during the interview, and promote the content. Once published, any editing will not be possible. Which, by the way, I love that because I don't want people coming back to me saying, can you take
Yeah.
out that can you take out that like just sign off that you trust me enough to let me do this the way I do it.
Yeah.
Talk about the legality of that and just generally when you're podcasting, what you have to be prepared for.
Yeah. So just for background, when I started my show, as an entertainment lawyer, I kind of knew the ropes, but I decided I really needed to know how this podcasting thing fits into that equation. And there are some significant differences between other forms of media. So I wrote a book. I did a bunch of research and it turned into the podcast blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. And that's how you position yourself as an expert, as we said earlier. So this has been my evangelical mission for podcasters is if you're interviewing guests, get them to sign a release, something that says, I consent to you recording me, I consent to you editing the recording, I consent to you publishing the recording, and this is irrevocable, and I'm not going to ask you to take it down or change it once it's up. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've recently added an extra sentence into the language that also gives the assurances to the guest that if I'm using AI tools in the process of editing and producing the show, that I'm not going to change the meaning or context of what's said. I think that's a big concern that people are starting to have around AI. And just they're consenting to the use as long as it doesn't do these things.
Yeah.
So I think it's hugely important because some of us live in states where we require one party of consent for recordings. Others live in two-party states, and that's really more about wiretap laws.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just a smart move to always get your guests to say, yes, go ahead, do it. Use it as how you see fit. I also include language about any and all media now known or hereafter devised and in perpetuity. So if I decide to write a book and use excerpts from my podcast in the book,
Yeah.
I don't need to go back and ask for another permission.
Okay. Really great stuff there. I love that. But that brings up kind of the direction I want to go, which is,
Mhm.
when you write a book or when you write an article, you have content that can be repurposed and can be
Yeah.
put up on social and everything. The beauty of podcasting, and I want to get your take on it, but you have so we have the audio of this, right?
Hmm.
I also have the video of this because we're both on camera. All
Yeah.
right. We have the transcription of this.
Hmm.
So we have three different mediums that can all be repurposed and reutilized. Talk through that a little bit and the
Yeah.
value of that.
Well, the obvious thing is you could publish it as a video, full-length video. You could publish it as full-length audio. You could take the transcript and publish that separately or treat or break it up or whatever. And you can chop it up. So you could do short-form video for TikTok and Instagram if your audience is there. You can do a tweet of a sentence that's been extracted from something one of us says. Those kinds of things all. So you could actually generate probably 100 different pieces of content from doing one video recorded interview in, all these different media. You could turn it into blog posts. You could take, like I said, the social media. You could make an online course and build stuff into it as well, and maybe even monetize by productizing some of the content. And yeah, I mean, the opportunities are sort of endless if you're willing to put in some time or hire a VA to do it. That's what I do. Is I have a VA in the Philippines who, after I publish my weekly episode on YouTube, she goes and downloads the video and chops it up, and then you'll see TikToks and Instagram posts and things like that.
Yeah.
And we're figuring out what's working and what's not, and experimenting. And that's the nature of marketing. You have to experiment.
Yeah. And again, I think there's a misnomer that you have to do it all yourself, and that just couldn't be further from the truth. People know I've got a full-time VA who curates all of this content for all the different channels and creates the videos. And there's also, software that's integrated, like Opus can break a
Yeah.
podcast down into 5 clips. You've got transcription services that are, I don't know, $15 a month or something that
Yeah.
transcribe it. Now we've got AI. And I want to just take the last little section of our show and talk about AI. The thing that I've been doing, I mentioned this before. And by the way, if you're listening and you're like, hey, you know what, I want to hear the podcast, but I don't have time, or I want to get a quick synopsis of it. I'm creating something called Blogcast, where I'm taking a 20-page transcript using AI with specific prompts to bring it down to a 2-page, 700-word summary and posting those up on my blog. So talk a little bit about AI and how you see that infiltrating into the podcast space and helping us to curate the content.
Well, I think there are a lot of great AI tools. You mentioned Opus Clip, which is one for taking video and condensing it into 1 minute shorter form stuff. There's others out there. There's one called Cast Magic. There's one called Capshow that podcasters are using to create transcripts and pull those excerpts and things like that. That can be really beneficial. There are some legal and ethical concerns that we have to address about those things. I mean, I'm not thrilled at the idea of training the worldwide AI systems on my content. Sometimes I do it, but as I think about it, I realize, well, maybe I don't want everything I do to be run through ChatGPT or one of these other services so that it's there. And I'll say, as lawyers, we really have to be concerned about what we say that relates to our clients' stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do litigation, so I'm not too worried that I'll make a statement about law that then might be quoted in a brief from the other side in a case or something, but it could happen.
Yeah.
And so we have to be a little thoughtful. Certainly don't reveal direct client confidences, but also thinking a little further ahead about how we talk about things. And of course, there's lawyer advertising rules as well that have to be complied with in some jurisdictions. I think the First Amendment is strong here, and this idea that you might have to register every podcast episode with your state bar. There's a couple of state bars that seem to think they should do that, and hopefully that'll go by the wayside before too long.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's added, the AI continues to help us, curate the content in a way that's useful for everybody. I mean, we're winning on the automation and it's less cost than doing anything manually. Yeah. And the audience is winning in the sense that they're getting all this, chunked down content that's easy to digest, which since we all have attention spans of fleas we need.
I sometimes use AI on the front end to create the outline for the show, or to come up with a catchy title for the
Mm,
episode,
I like that.
or those kind of the subject line kind of thing, or to turn or to extract some content from the episode to make it an email message that goes out in my weekly newsletter to my clients and
Yeah,
things. All of the so the AI is really yeah, part of the pre and post production
yeah,
process, and it just does it faster. Maybe not
yeah.
better, but faster. So that's valuable.
I mean, we've laid out a lot of reasons why someone should consider podcasting and going into that taking that dive into that pool. Are there people that shouldn't, and if so, why?
I think that if your voice and your manner and your presentation isn't your strong suit, isn't a strong suit,
Hmm.
if there's something about the way you present yourself that might be a negative, you may have a
You're an
brilliant
irritating
mind,
person.
irritating person, or you're just sort of a soft-spoken, sort of
Yeah,
shy,
yeah,
and it doesn't put forward your best you,
right.
maybe stay away from it,
Yeah,
or maybe use it as an intermediate tool, and maybe don't publish the episodes, but use it to create the content, or who knows
right.
what.
Okay, okay.
So that's one of the big objections that a lot of folks have that I think is not really a valid objection, is how much time it takes.
Yeah.
It's true, it's a bit time consuming, but when you think about, I don't know about you, but I used to go to bar association lunches where I would, sit and hear a speaker, and I'd talk to the 8 people at the table I was seated at, and maybe hand out a couple of business cards, and I'd maybe make a follow-up contact with 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
And that's 2, 3 hours out of my day.
Hmm.
I'd much rather spend those 2 or 3 hours out of my day making a piece of content that is going to land with 30, 50, 100, 1,000 subscribers or more
Yeah.
with a podcast one time, and do that every week. So
Yeah. The other person that shouldn't do it, from my take, is if you're not good at staying consistent with things. If you find yourself like excited about things and then not following through, so you're going to do 5 episodes or 10 episodes and give up, and you might not know that until you try it.
yeah,
But I think if you kind of know yourself and realize, like,
yeah,
this is just another, flash in my brain that I'm going to do and probably give up after a period of time, and invest time, money, and energy and not stick with it. And not everybody should stick with it, but I'm saying
yeah.
it's something you really do need to be consistent with.
I agree. I think it's worth a try for anybody to see if
Okay,
you can
fair enough.
develop a system that will get you into a groove and a habit of
Yeah.
making it. I mean, I do a show every Thursday afternoon. I do it live on video on YouTube and stuff. And my workflow is such that on, Sunday night, I think about the topic for 5 minutes or something, and I
Hmm.
start to get it going in my head. By Monday, I've got an outline. Tuesday, I write a script or a detailed outline or whatever. And then, Wednesday, I sort of give myself the room to let it percolate, so that Thursday I'm able to record that episode a little bit every day. And it's become actually, I have it in my to-do list every day. So today we're going to do this. And, it's 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and I'm done.
Yeah.
And anybody can be consistent with small enough chunks of things.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we've given people a great story to consider of why podcasting might be something to get into, and there's just again, I couldn't be a bigger fan, and I wish I had done it when
Thanks.
you did it, when you started
Yeah.
16 years ago. I've only been in it 5 years, and I've had the time of my life. I've never been so happy with a decision in my business career in 20 years as
Yeah.
podcasting. So I'm just thrilled. Let's wrap up though with our game-changing podcast, the Expert Edge podcast with Colin Boyd. Talk to that a little bit, Gordon.
So Colin is a really interesting guy. He's a client of mine, but I would have been saying this about his show even if he weren't. He's an Australian gentleman whose focus is on training public speakers uh, to create speeches and talks that sell. Sell from Stage Academy is his brand. So the Expert Edge is sort of extending that and talking about how to present story, how to use story to advance your own whatever interests you have, but also just sort of getting into the mindset. And he talks to a lot of folks about their social media. He does interviews with people who are crushing it in
Yeah.
social media content, those kinds of things. And he's always got an interesting take on things. And tends to do sort of short form, about 15-minute long episodes most of the time, when it's a solo episode at least, and I find that eminently consumable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I always tell people I ask this selfishly because I'm sometimes I get a little some of the podcasts I'm listening to get a little stale, and
yeah,
I may be listening to too many that are political, and I need to like go a different direction. And I just love micro learning. That's
yeah,
become a big thing these days. And so anytime I can just take 30 minutes or an hour and learn something from an interview or from a really smart podcaster, I'm on it. Um, as we wrap up, I want to thank our sponsors, of course, Rankings.io, helping you get your marketing done and get the business in the door. And I also just want to promote my program, Sales Free Selling. If you're a lawyer that is looking to make equity, you're on your own and you want to double, triple your book of business and really do things in an efficient way and non-salesy, you're going to want to come and audit one of my classes. I teach every Tuesday morning from 8 to 9:30 Central. I've got 14, 15 lawyers from around the world in this class where they're building skills, things you never learn in law school. So if you'd like to talk with me about that, you can just go and email me at steve@fretzin.com. We'll set up a quick chat and then get you into the class to audit. The things that people say about it, I have actually all that recorded. I need to just put that out on social, but like everybody's just blown away because they're just like tip after tip after tip that they just never realized like how much we're covering in 90 minutes in a class. So cool stuff there, Gordon. People want to get in touch with you. They want to hire you as their lawyer. They've got a podcast and they want to get some legal advice and they want to talk to you. What's the best digits?
well, I'm fortunate to have a name that is fairly distinct.
Yes,
So
true.
firemark.com or gordonfiremark.com will get you in the direction of my stuff. Firemark.com is the law firm. Gordonfiremark.com is all the other stuff that I put out there, online courses and coaching and masterminds and all those kinds of things. And yeah, follow me on YouTube or any social channel. G Firemark is the way to find me there. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I'm glad that we connected and that we were able to come on and put our collective wisdom down about this podcasting thing because I think there's attorneys that just wonder if that's something they should invest in. And I think you and I are both on board with that. And again, if you have the personality for it and you know, it's just, there's just so many, I'm not going to go through the whole list again, but thanks, Gordon, for being on the show. I just appreciate you and sharing all this great wisdom.
well, Steve, I feel the same way. Thank you for the opportunity and for helping lawyers do what we do and make the most of it. So
Well, it's a dirty job.
appreciate being here.
Somebody's got to do it, you know. And I'm that guy. Anyway, thanks everybody for spending time with Gordon and I today on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. We are here for your listening pleasure and viewing pleasure and reading pleasure and all the different things that we just talked about in how we repurpose content. But listen, it's all about you being that lawyer, living the lawyer's life. And that means confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker, everybody. Take care, be safe, be well. We'll talk again soon.